Thank you for joining us. We're talking about blind men who can see, and we're talking about shepherds and sheep. And we've got the same group of people, 2 chapters in God's Word, chapter 9 and 10. And we're in chapter 10, starting with verse 7. Yesterday, we talked about the communal sheepfold there in town, that there would be a doorkeeper, and the shepherd would come and present himself, and the doorkeeper would open, and he would call out some names and then make his noise, and his sheep would follow him, and he would lead them out. Now, this time, he's using the illustration of the wilderness sheepfolds. You've got your sheep, and you're like a mile or two away from town. There were rock sheepfolds that were out in the wilderness, peppered across the wilderness, that would have 3 walls. And then when the shepherd would call his sheep in, they would come back into that sheepfold, and then he would lie down across the front. He was the 4th wall. And so he was the 4th wall. He was also the door. He was the means of getting in and out of the sheepfold. And so he would lie down across that vacant wall and pity the wolf that tries to get to those sheep. Okay? He's the protector. He's the one that got them in, and he's the one who leads them back out to enjoy pasture. And so he was literally the door to the sheepfold. And so that's where we're coming from this time. Jesus describing himself as that. Sorry. Jesus said to them again, Truly, truly, I say to you, I'm the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not know them. I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved, and will go in and out and find pasture. That's a sign of being a pretty contented and well taken care of sheep. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. When the apostles were being persecuted by the Jewish leadership after the crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus, Gamaliel spoke to the persecuting leadership, and he was basically telling them, if this is not of God, it's going to die. But if it is of God, you better not be fighting against him. And he spoke about some thieves who tried to pass them off as the true mess themselves off as the true shepherd. And so Gamaliel says this, some time ago Theudas rose up claiming to be somebody, and a group of about 400 men joined up with him, but he was killed, and all who followed him were dispersed and came to nothing. After this man, Judas of Galilee rose up in the days of the census and drew away some people after him. He too perished, and all those who followed him were scattered. Okay. False messiahs. False messiahs. And then, of course, false leaders. What Jesus said about them, he said, speaking of thieves and robbers, he said, you devour widows' houses, and for an appearance sake make long flowing prayers. You're going to receive greater condemnation. That's Mark 12:40. And so what do we do with all of that? Well, Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 and 14, he said there's a wide way that leads to destruction, and straight is the path and narrow the way that leads to life. And he said in John 14:6, I am the way. And so the narrow way to life is through one person, Jesus Christ. How many wrong answers are there to eternity and God and heaven and hell and nirvana and all that kind of stuff? It seems to me that the road gets wider and wider and wider the more wrong answers you come up with. How many wrong answers can you come up with to 2 plus 2? Name it. But how many right answers? One right answer. How many right answers are there to heaven and hell? 1 Timothy 2:5. There is one God and one mediator between man and God, the man Jesus. That's narrow, as opposed to all the wrong answers you can come up with. Have a great day.